They're accusing Trump of disparaging military people. And here's the piece. When President Trump canceled the visit to the unnamed American cemetery near Paris in 2018, he blamed rain for the last-minute decision, saying that the helicopter couldn't fly and that the Secret Service wouldn't drive him there. Neither claim was true. Trump rejected the idea of the visit because he feared his hair would become disheveled in the rain and because he did not believe it important to honor American war dead. That sounds like Trump, right? This is according to 4 people with firsthand knowledge of the discussion that day, but we can't tell you who they are. In a conversation with senior staff members on the morning of the scheduled visit, Trump said, "Why should I go to that cemetery? It's filled with losers." In a separate conversation on the same trip, Trump referred to the more than 1,800 Marines who lost their lives at Belleau Wood as suckers for getting killed. Now, I'm sorry, Trump can say a lot of stupid stuff. You don't hear me defending him when he says dumb stuff. The other day when he compared a police shooting to a missed putt, again, what he was trying to say was not bad. It was an insensitive metaphor. I said so. I do not believe he would not go to a military ceremony and say, "Why should I go?" Because these people were suckers for getting killed. However, we do know that there are plenty of sources who have fed plenty of false stories, high-up sources who have fed plenty of false stories all through the Trump administration to the press. The press has not only printed them, they've given themselves Pulitzer Prizes for printing them, and those stories have turned out to be completely, wholly false. It is an act of journalistic malfeasance to run a story like this with no named sources, and it's even worse. It is even worse when I see some of the never-Trumpers giving it credence. Well, it kind of sounds like Trump. Well, it doesn't really sound like Trump. It sounds like his voice. It sounds like words that he would use, but it is very, very hard to imagine Trump saying this. And I know, you're going to say, well, he dissed John McCain and said, "I prefer my pilots who don't get shot down." That's what this is being based on. That's what they're depending on. And we know because of the Charlottesville hoax, the good people on both sides hoax, we know that this is now going to become gospel on the left. They've already put out an ad appealing to veterans saying he's dissed you. Byron York of the Washington Examiner made a brilliant find. He went and got John Bolton's book, and John Bolton describes the same event. Now, the point of this is we know John Bolton hates Donald Trump. We know if Donald Trump had said those things, John Bolton would be the first person to have reported it. The book is just a hit job on Trump. What's it called? The Room Where It Happened is just a hit job on Trump. So he would report this. This is what he says instead. This is Bolton in his book. On Saturday, I went to the U.S. ambassador's residence where Trump was saying to brief him before his bilateral with Macron. The weather was bad, and Kelly and I spoke about whether to travel as planned to the Belleau Wood monuments and nearby American cemeteries where many U.S. World War I dead were buried. Marine One's crew was saying that bad visibility could make it imprudent to chopper to the cemetery. The ceiling was not too low for Marines to fly in combat, but flying POTUS was obviously something very different. If a motorcade were necessary, it could take between 90 and 120 minutes each way along roads that were not exactly freeways, posing an unacceptable risk that we could not get the president out of France quickly enough in case of an emergency. It was a straightforward decision to cancel the visit, but very hard for a Marine like Kelly to recommend, having originally been the one to suggest Belleau Wood, which is an iconic battle in Marine Corps history. Trump agreed, and it was decided that others would drive to the cemetery instead. As the meeting broke up and we prepared to leave for the Elysee Palace to see Macron, Trump pulled Kelly and me aside and said, "Find another spot for Mira, Melania's people are on the warpath." Goes on and on with that. And then he says, the press turns canceling the cemetery visit into a story that Trump was afraid of the rain and took glee in pointing out that other world leaders traveled around during the day. Of course, none of them were the president of the United States, but the press didn't understand that rules for U.S. presidents are different from the rules for 190 other leaders who don't command the world's greatest military forces. That's John Bolton telling the same story. None of this, these people are losers. I mean, come on. Trump denies it. Let's hear from Trump himself.
It was a totally fake story, and that was confirmed by many people who were actually there. It was a terrible thing that somebody could say the kind of things, and especially to me, because I've done more for the military than almost anybody else. You look at how the VA is doing, it's doing incredibly well. We got all sorts of things done, from accountability to veterans' choice to everything. And it's got right now the highest approval rating that it's ever had 91% approval rating. It's never been anywhere close to that. Nobody's done what I've done, and that includes salary increases, but it really includes the rebuilding of our military.
And you know, Trump, if Trump is nothing else, he has this visceral love for this country that may be uninformed. It may not be, you know, it may just be the kind of patriotism that people his age, my age, just feel naturally. Who knows? But who could think that Donald Trump was blowing off the military in those terms? Even, you know, people who were there, Sarah Sanders, she says she was there. She says it's total BS. I was actually there. One of the people part of the discussion. This never happened. But you can get ready for this now. This is going to be right up through the election. They're going to reimagine that the things that the left does, Trump will do, the violence and the inciting violence. And they're going to just make up stories using sources. I'm sure these sources really told this to Goldberg. I'm sure they really said this to the reporter. But the sources, you know, if they're not going to come forward, that you should not run a story like that. It's malfeasance. It really is bad. And, you know, it is funny. Somebody was tweeting this online. I didn't catch who it was. But when you go back over Trump's history, there are a lot of times that Trump has been put forward as really a benefactor of people, a kind of guy who really respected ordinary people. A lot of various acts of kindness Trump did when he was a, you know, flashy millionaire, billionaire, when he was out there as the branding himself. He did a lot of really decent things, showed up for people and paid their mortgages on their homes. During the 80s, all the farms were collapsing. He paid mortgages on home. There was also that time that, remember that Jennifer Hudson, that really talented singer, she was in, is it Dreamgirls? Was that the name of it? She's a really talented singer, and her family was murdered. And Trump put her up at the Trump International Hotel and Tower free of charge. And People magazine wrote a big piece about it. He doesn't just have a golden touch for business. He also has a heart of gold. You know, that Trump is gone from the press, not because he's not still there. And again, you've heard me attack Trump for his rudeness. You've heard me attack Trump for the way he treats people, his underlings, sometimes people who deserve respect. But that Trump is gone entirely. I mean, again, we always talk about nuance, you know, just a little bit of nuance, just a little bit of maybe seeing things from both sides. This is going to be gone. And so these last couple of months before the election, this is what you're going to hear. You're going to hear lies. You're going to hear transference, where they transfer their violence and their malfeasance onto Donald Trump. And also, of course, this imagination. This is the important thing, going back to what I was started out talking about when I was talking about the GDR, East Germany, under Soviet rule. A lot of those Stasi guys were people who had fought Hitler, you know, people who had opposed Nazism. And they just assumed that America were Nazis, that America were the Nazis. And so anybody who did anything that was not socialist were immediately on the other side and must be Nazis. And that was how they justified spying on ordinary people, spying on children, arresting children, killing prisoners, all those things. And the left has so worked itself up into that mindset that they've turned themselves into proto-tyrants. And who can doubt that they would do it if they had the power, if they had the chance?